I want to take this opportunity to welcome you all to this great event that we have each year for the Carroll County Chamber. I am proud to be serving as the chair of the Carroll County Chamber for the current year. If you would, as a matter of housekeeping, turn off your cell phones or place them on stun, we would appreciate that so that it doesn't take away from any of our presenters or the program today. Thank you. Again, we want to thank you for coming today, and I trust that you all have enjoyed the wonderful lunch that was provided to us. Today, our program is the annual Carroll County Budget Luncheon, and you will be hearing shortly from Mr. Ted Zaleski. Ted is the Director of Management and Budget for Carroll County. Ted has graciously been providing informative insights into the county budget to our chamber members for 11 years now, Ted, and you're still filling the room. That's great. So it must be good information for everyone. I'd also want to take this opportunity to thank the Community Media Center. They will be filming today's event, and we're actually being streamed online real time. So a great thing. So let's give them a hand for coming out today. I know I saw Marion here. Thank you, Marion. Also like to introduce at this time the two sponsors for today's event. First, Mr. Carl Lehman is here representing Rager, Lehman & Houck. Carl is the president and managing partner for that firm. They're a Carroll County Chamber member for going on 60 years now. 60. I think that's great. Let's give him a round of applause. And our second sponsor is Mr. Dave Peliquin. Dave is president of Main Street Advisors, and they have been chamber members for 13 years now. So, David, thank you. We'll be hearing from you shortly. All right. I'd like to take this opportunity to also acknowledge Mr. Steve Guthrie, Superintendent of Carroll County Public Schools, is with us today. Thank you. And I'd also like to recognize the former chairs of the Chamber of Commerce who are in attendance today. First, Mr. Dave Bollinger from Barnes Bollinger Insurance. David, thank you. Mr. Wayne Barnes from R. Wayne Barnes Life and Long-Term Care Insurance. Wayne. Brenda Fisher from Carroll Community Bank. Mike Shank from M&T Bank. Mike. Dr. Faye Papalardo, Carroll Community College. And Mr. Steve Aquino from Aquino Financial Services. Steve. I would also like to ask the members of the current Board of Directors for the Carroll County Chamber, if you're here, to just stand up and be recognized. Wonderful. Thank you, guys. And finally, I would like to also recognize Mr. Mike McMullen, Chamber President. Today's corporate sponsors, as I said, are Rager, Lehman & Houck and Main Street Advisors. Our first sponsor message today will be delivered by Carl Lehman, President and Managing Partner with Rager, Lehman & Houck.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks everyone for coming today. I think it's always a great event to be here. We certainly are pleased to have been sponsoring this event for quite a number of years. I'm not exactly sure. I didn't go back and look at how many years it's been.
7.
Okay. There you go. Somebody's counting. But we're really pleased to be doing this because we believe that the open discussion between government and public is always beneficial to everyone. And Ted's candor and his open dialogue about the Carroll County budget should be a model, I think, for our national budget and our national leaders. As I attend this presentation every year, I cannot help but think a little bit about our nation's budget problems. Obviously, our nation's budget is a lot more difficult and complex than the one that the Carroll County government needs to deal with. However, it does kind of make you wonder a little bit about what's the difference, and I'm going to be non-political in this statement. I feel that our national political leaders on both sides of the aisle have left us down when it comes to budget and economy and the policies that we need to have. The latest debacle, from my industry's standpoint, is passing a law for taxes after the year's already passed that's retroactively approved for the prior year, putting the Internal Revenue Service in a place where it's very, very difficult for them to do their job. Here we are 2 months almost after the end of the year, and we still don't have tax forms to do our job. It's truly reprehensible. This is not the first failure to act on our national leaders' part, though. For instance, in October of 2010, Congress passed an estate tax law extension, which should have been passed at least 10 months prior to that. And in that process, we had people, for instance, like George Steinbrenner, who dies lucky in that 10-month window, and as a billionaire his estate pays zero estate tax. And whether or not you think the death tax is appropriate or inappropriate, his billionaire friends who died a few months before he did or died a few months after he did paid an enormous amount of tax. What's the fairness in all of that? On multiple occasions, Congress has failed to act on the debt ceiling extension, which, again, whether you're for it or against it, the thing is they've already appropriated and they have already expended the funds, and to hold hostage those persons who are waiting to get funds from the national government, it's not fair when they've already appropriated the funds. The final insult is that Congress has failed to pass a comprehensive budget for 4 years, since 2009. Misinformation on all parties has compounded the problem. And as an example, we often hear that, if we would just cut out the unnecessary expenditures, just get rid of the waste in government, that it would all be better. Certainly, I'm all for eliminating waste. Certainly, I would love to see us be a lot more efficient in the government. But here's the real truth. Last year, the deficit was $1.2 trillion. The entire discretionary budget of the United States is $1.15 trillion. If we completely eliminated all of the discretionary spending, you don't have to be an accountant to figure this out, we could balance the budget. That's really not a very optimal way to fix it, is it? Meanwhile, the budget of the Internal Revenue Service, which, again, many people hate the Internal Revenue Service, and I certainly understand that, but they are the primary method of raising revenue in the United States. And yet they decreased the budget, so that now we have a system where people don't trust the Internal Revenue Service. They lose confidence in our ability to run a tax collection system, and you end up with less compliance. Who would, in their right mind, eliminate the one body that generates most of the revenue for the country? Again, no matter whether you like them or you dislike them, they are who raises the revenue for us. Obviously, at this point, I could go on an Andy Rooney rant, and for those of you who like Andy Rooney, I will spare you the rest of my rant. But let's contrast this picture with the budget process that we see here in the county. Certainly, the county sees many difficult problems. Some of them are politically charged. At the end of the day, though, there is something that happens. It's compromise. And we might not all like the answers, and probably nobody here will like all the answers that come up in the budget process. But at the end of the day, there is a compromise, and I think we should be thanking our county government for doing that, for getting the job done that needs to happen, no matter whether you like the end result. In our current environment, governments, businesses, and organizations are facing ever-increasing challenges. In 2008, the world's financial institutions came dangerously close to a meltdown. The pace of change that we all experience is incredible. Most of us understand that we must face and adapt to the challenges quickly but intelligently. Successful organizations learn that they must develop strong internal and external resources in order to accomplish that goal. Rager, Lehman, and Houck has been working hard to develop our own internal resources as well as external resources so that we can be strong advisors to the people that count on us as our clients. As they just mentioned, we've been serving the Carroll County business community for almost 60 years now. I'm not quite 60 years old, so it wasn't me. But we believe that investing in our community and the relationships is instrumental to our success. Our clients often remark about the amount of time and effort that we invest in learning to understand their organization. We do this because we understand that our success is directly related to our clients' success. By investing our time and our effort in really understanding our clients' organization, we can help them succeed in achieving their goals. And when our clients succeed, they become better clients. Thank you for attending today, and thank you to Ted for your excellent service to Carroll County.
That's great. Carl, thank you, not only for your support of this event, but also for all you've done for the Chamber and the community over the years, and for sharing your insights today. Our next sponsor message will be given by Dave Peliquin, President of Main Street Advisors. Join me in welcoming Dave.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks to everyone for attending. I also would concur with Carl that getting everyone together, business leaders, government, nonprofits, to hear straight from the horse's mouth what we're facing is a sorry to call you that, Ted, but is a good thing, and it keeps us focused on smaller. And my theme is smaller is better. I really think, and you can take this into a number of different spheres, but I don't know that things always getting bigger is necessarily good. My firm has been in Westminster 14 years. When we started our relationship with Rager, Lehman, and Houck, we had $14 million under management. We have 45 now. We're still small. That's still considered, in the world I work in, a small firm. And I'm not denigrating any firms that get bigger than we have, but there's a reason why we haven't, and that's because we would have to fall under the umbrella or fall under the control of firms that don't always take the same level of care that I like to think I do. Main Street Advisors are completely independent, so anything we're doing, we work with Charles Schwab, but anything we're doing is because I think, and our investment people think, it's what should be done. The message I'd have you take with you today, we just came off a great year in the stock market. If you were here last year and the year before, I wasn't completely positive, which doesn't mean you shouldn't be in stocks. It just means don't be running head first into what might be a wall. I think we've done nothing in the last 2 years on a national level. The county's been doing things, you can like them or not like them. The city of Westminster's done things, you can like them or not like them. Maryland's another story, but the national government, I would agree with Carl, is almost a disgrace. The uncertainty that you keep hearing, I'll have clients say, what do they mean uncertainty? And I'll just say to you, if you and your household had debt equal to your family's income, leave out your mortgage, because the federal debt isn't secured by anything. The federal debt, we spend money, we borrow money and spend it. So imagine if your credit card debt, I'll let go ahead, a car loan could be in there, but no mortgage debt. Your family's income right now, imagine if your debt was equal to your family's income. And also remember the payback, 2 or 3 years. Most credit cards are set up on a 2, 3, or 4 year revolving payback. That's about what the federal government does. The average, they've got to roll debt every 2 weeks. And so all I'm saying to people, I'm not saying that correctly, all that I'm saying to people is recognize that we're in uncertain times globally. Japan's worse than we are. Europe, you've read about, but Europe's similar to where we are. In terms of the amount of debt that has to be serviced, there gets to be a point. There was a book written, you've heard about, Rogoff and Reinhardt, and one of them is a professor from the University of Maryland, called This Time It's Different, that's been almost spun off into other books over the last 3 or 4 years in my industry. And it was an exhaustive study of governments going back to, yes, the 14th century, including monarchies. What happens when debt reaches a certain percentage of an economy? in the book found that at 90%, you get to a point of almost no return, that no one's ever recovered without major restructuring, which means reneging on debt, something not good. So I know I sound like a black cloud flying in over here at lunchtime. All I tell people is you can't bet on that. So don't, good or bad, don't act like everything is just like it's always been, though. Make sure you're a financial advisor, you agree with him or her on how they're seeing things. Because obviously if somebody's working with me, they know if you're probably comfortable being 100% equities, I would tell you you're crazy. And maybe you wouldn't anyway be 100%. People who are 40 and under, by the way, that's 20 years away probably at least till they retire, can go ahead and go status quo as long as they can handle that statement coming like we saw them 3-4 years ago. And when your 401k went from whatever number to maybe half what it was a horrible feeling. If you manage to get through that, then you probably are okay if it happens again. I'm not saying it's going to happen again. I'm saying we haven't fixed anything. The 07-09 crisis was a debt crisis. You tell me if you think there's been much done in Washington, for sure. Not even in Annapolis, other than raise taxes. Again, I want to thank Ted for coming out every year. I'm hoping this year's message is better than the last 2 years, but being that I guess I don't sound very bright and sunny, maybe I won't be surprised if it's not. Again, thanks everybody for being here. It's a pleasure to help sponsor this event every year. And if you'd like to speak, talk, the contact information's on your flyer. Thank you.
David, thank you again for your loyal support of this event and of the Chamber as well over the years. If anyone is interested in sponsoring an upcoming Chamber event, we do have several events for the coming year that have not been spoken for as yet. If you would see Mike McMullen today before you leave, we would appreciate it. So let's begin our program. As I'm sure most of you know, our speaker today, Mr. Ted Zaleski. Ted is the Carroll County Budget Director, Director of Management and Budget, to be specific. Ted's responsible for the budget, grants, risk management functions, and he's also a major resource to the Chamber and to the rest of the community. Ted lives in Carroll County, just outside of Westminster, and today Ted will talk about the issues involved in the county's upcoming fiscal year budget, and then he'll also allow some time for your questions. So let's welcome Ted Zaleski.
I don't often get to be the ray of sunshine. Just a few thoughts before I dive in here. First, there's not quite as many people here as we've had it a lot of times, and I'm pretty sure it's not me. So if Mike McMullen is irritating people, you need to let him know. So,
Thank you.
and also just an observation, I saw that 40% of the community college trustee board is here. And, well, I won't say anymore, but I'm not saying it means anything. Yesterday, Wayne Barnes and I were together with a group talking about stormwater management late into the evening. Stormwater management fees, yes. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of you are jealous that you weren't there with us. But he said to me something along the lines, shouldn't you be preparing for tomorrow? And I told him, well, I'm not ready yet. It's not a blank piece of paper, but I'm not ready yet. But I was thinking about it after I left there. My problem with this is not finding enough to talk about. It's trying to figure out how do I limit what I'm going to talk about. Particularly since we're almost already out of time. I might just need to go right to the questions. But Carl and Dave were going at it a little bit there. There was an unusual opening comments this year. And speaking of Carl and Dave, now I don't know if this is true, but I heard that they had lunch the other day, and they were talking about this sponsoring this thing, and they said they're going to keep doing it until I get it right. So. Okay, one last thing before we get serious. Okay, you remember the song "Don't Worry, Be Happy," Bobby McFerrin? Probably nobody would suggest that as the theme song for this presentation, but I'm promising you that I am going to offer you today reasons for optimism. Before we get there, the last handful of years have been difficult. It wasn't the Depression of the 1930s, but it's the closest thing we've had since the Depression. There's nothing else we've been through that we can compare and say, okay, this is what happened last time we went through this. And that's meant a lot of change. And I could spend the entire session just talking about what has changed. But I'm not going to do that. I do want to share just a couple thoughts to give you a quick sense. On the capital side of things, where we build schools and roads, take care of our roads, all the project kind of stuff. The budgets we're planning for now are about the same size as they were a decade ago. But the money isn't worth as much now as it was a decade ago. So we really have less buying power for capital purposes than we did 10 years ago. Based on what we're projecting for fiscal year 14, the budget we're going to be working on, our operating budget over 5 years will have gone up about. Accountings can't look at as supporting ongoing services. There's money that moves, restricted money that moves between some funds. When you look at things like property tax and income tax, the ongoing revenues, over 5 years, that increase is about 2%. So we've pretty much been standing still. All of our significant revenues, and when I say significant, we really get into things you probably could call insignificant, less than 1% of our budget. All of them have fallen in recent years. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about declining rates of growth. I'm saying less money this year than you got the previous year. We've been through 4 straight negative reassessments in the county. -20, -20, -17, -4. The only thing that you can even remotely compare it to, 1994, 1/3 of the county was assessed at a negative 0.4%. We've never had anything like this. And the coming back is going to be slow. On the property tax side, because Maryland assesses roughly 1/3 of the county every 3 years, and then any increases are phased in over 3 years, you can see we're coming off these 3 negatives. We need 3 positive years just to get beyond the effect of those negative reassessments. Without some, I think, totally unexpected leap in assessments, we're going to be seeing years before we get back to what we once would have thought was normal sort of activity on the property tax revenue side. Of the people who report to the commissioners, we eliminated about 12% of our workforce. We're now paying, after years of me talking about this, we're now paying part of the cost of teacher retirements, a cost that the state had paid for decades. Now we're taking on a portion of that. And speaking of the state, if you've looked at the governor's budget at all, or the information they released with the governor's budget, you'll see information that says that the county is getting an increase in state funding. And that's true, sort of, if you don't look too deep at it. Even on the surface, we're just barely increasing, but the problem is that increase includes an increase in what the state is paying for retirement costs, which isn't really a budget increase. Nobody gets to spend any money. We don't provide any services with that. It's just being counted in the number from their end, their spending number. And it also ignores what I just said, that we're paying part of the cost of state retirement, and that will be going up over $1 million this year, which is more than any other changes that the county is realizing. So we are still, in a net way, losing out in our relationship with the state. Not as badly as in recent years. It's better in the sense that it's not changing as much, but we're still losing out. And what we're getting now, the increases that are in there, are increases from decreases. They took things away and are giving some of it back. So it's only an increase if you look at it in a very short time frame. If you take a little bit longer view, all it is reducing the amount that we've lost. Now, after having said all that, some of you might be saying, okay, now he said something about reasons for optimism. Here it comes. For a handful of years, I have not been able to find reasons for optimism. And I've had people over the years come up to me and say, well, things are getting better, right? Or they'll point out something that happened in the news and say, well, this means it's going to be good now, right? And I've been unable to answer any of those people with a positive, yes, I agree, there's reason for optimism. I truly have not been able to get myself to say that. You know, I try and ease into it a little bit by just, saying, well, yeah, things are still challenging, but, what I'm really saying is, no, there's no reason for optimism. We don't have anything. But now we do. Talk about home sales. The average price of a house selling in Carroll County is up for the first time since 2007. It's not up a lot. But the thing for me is we had a line that was going down, and now it's turned up. I think that's some reason for saying that's good news. The units sold is up 16% from last year. There's more activity. Average days in the market is down 15% from last year. People who are trying to sell are doing it more quickly. And the average months of inventory is back to a level we last saw in 2006, 2007. Now, any one of those things by himself would not be a compelling argument to me. I'm not even really saying there's a compelling argument here yet. But you take all those things together, and to me, I do look at that now and say, yeah, that seems like good news. That's things heading in the right direction for us. Now, of course, all those things eventually affect assessments. And I just told you we're coming off 4 consecutive negative reassessments. I think the good news here is that we will soon, I'm hoping next year, but I think we will soon start to see positive assessments again. And that in itself is not all that great news, except when you're looking at it after 4 consecutive negatives. And it does feel like a reason for optimism. Building permits are climbing again. Nothing like historical levels, but they are increasing again. And maybe even more important than that, the development pipeline that eventually becomes building permits is starting to fill up again for the first time in a number of years. Now, again, don't want to oversell that. I'm not saying that we're seeing the same level of activity that we saw 10 years ago, but we are seeing the activity happening again. Recordation tax, which is very closely tied to the housing market, is climbing again. This is a revenue that at one point hit almost $23 million for the county and then dropped to about $7 million. We are now heading maybe for $9 million. Now, if you think about the 23, it doesn't sound like good news, but if you think about the 7, it looks like good news. This was something I found was really interesting to me. I would not have guessed this if somebody had just come and asked me this question, but the median household income in Carroll County actually rose through the Depression. Now, median household income has limited values. I think sometimes people put more on that than they really should, but it's an indication of something. And I thought it was a very interesting idea that we had seen that continue to grow even through the, I think I said the Depression, the recession.
Same thing.
And along the same lines, net taxable income from taxpayers more than $100,000 of income actually grew 15% from 2006 to 2010. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't people in other categories struggling and still struggling, but at least in that one high-end part of our economy, we saw growth even during difficult times. The labor force is growing again. Another one of those, we're not back to the same levels we once were, but it is growing again. And income tax, which is affected by a lot of the things I just talked about, is growing right now. And it's a good thing it is, because very, very little else has been. So there are reasons for optimism. And I guess I wasn't optimistic enough, because I don't think I see a single smile in the whole place. I truly meant that to be optimistic, though. Maybe I'm just bad at it. Now, I was going to say, I don't want you to get carried away, but nobody was getting carried away, so it kind of kills the next session. But while I do have optimism that I have not had for 5 years, however you might judge my optimism, there are still things to worry about, and we can't get carried away with jumping on those optimistic indicators. I I won't go into it, but as Carl and Dave said, the federal government is still concerned. Now, I can't draw a line from federal decisions to what's going to happen in Carroll County, but clearly there could be some impacts for us. The state budget will remain a concern. It's not as big a concern as it has been in recent years, though. They have in the ballpark of balanced budget. There's not going to be the same pressure on them to find solutions, and solutions in recent years has often meant counties. But until the General Assembly session is over, you don't know what will emerge from it, and clearly there could still be something we wouldn't like. I mentioned the teacher pensions. Right now, the existing law set the first 4 years of what we will have to pay in law. So we think we know what those numbers are, but the General Assembly made the law, they can change the law, that could still change on us, and we don't know what will happen after that 4th year. Now, the entire pension cost is something that's moving toward $30 million. Right now, this coming year, we're going to be paying a little over $5 million. Once this door is opened, they already made the big leap from it's a state obligation to now it's a shared obligation. Once you've gotten there, it's a lot easier to say, well, let's say your obligation is now X instead of Y. I mentioned a lot of nice things about the housing market. There is still uncertainty, though. I'm not sure many people would say worries are over, everything is good. We're going to hope we're seeing the beginning of a continued recovery, but I don't think we're clear yet of saying we know it's all happening the way we want it to now. There's uncertainty about income tax. It has been growing pretty well for us, but this is an area where we get very little information about what's driving our revenue until a couple years after it has happened. So we don't always know what's happening, and Carl kind of alluded to this. There are some things that happen with taxpayer behavior and changes in tax law that can change how much money we're receiving and kind of mask what's happening underneath, and we're always trying to figure that out. So it's possible that there are things happening that we don't know about yet. Water remains a big problem for us. We have two water things to think about. One is the availability of water, and the other is water quality. The EPA and MDE are pushing counties very hard on water quality issues. I don't know how much money we're going to spend on this, but I think I can answer it by saying a lot. I just don't know what number to put on that. And we won't have, it may be years before we have full clarity of what exactly is going to happen. And then this is always true. My point here is just it doesn't go away because there's not a lot of money. The conflict between demand for services, facilities, and infrastructure and the resources to provide them. Even as budgets have stood still, the things that people want have not gone away. And I rarely get people, calling or emailing saying, please suggest to the commissioners that you increase my child's class size, or you reduce the time, you increase the time it takes to remove the snow from my road. It just doesn't work that way. People will continue to want what they want. As we move through this process, there are some things I think that are likely to get a lot of attention. And kind of leading into that, this board, this will be their third budget. Prominent in what has driven their discussions have been a few ideas. One is to limit growth in the operating budget, which clearly has happened. Another is to cut capital spending, which clearly has happened. A third is to lower taxes. The first 2 years, for each of the first 2 years, they reduced the property tax rate. They are discussing another rate decrease this year. I fully expect that to be in the conversation. And they've talked about reducing debt. That has been happening. Our outstanding bond debt is decreasing. And in fact, based on current plans, will be 16% lower in fiscal year 19, which would be the end of our current plan, than when they came into office. So I think you're going to hear a tax conversation. You're going to hear discussion of education. Right now, I can't even pretend to tell you how that conversation is going to end but it will be a conversation. And I think you're going to hear a discussion of infrastructure, taking care of our roads, taking care of schools, taking care of the things we own. How are we approaching that, and are we putting enough money into doing it? So even with the signs of optimism, I fully expect another very challenging budget process. Now, all of you are impacted in some way by the choices that get made in the budget. And this is for my closing. I was thinking, Paul Harvey used to close with, Paul Harvey, good day. And Walter Cronkite used to close with, and that's the way it is. Now, I wanted to get something really snappy like that, because there's something I say at the end of every one of these, but I couldn't get it into a few words like that yet. I can keep thinking about it. But the message is, don't sit on the sideline and then complain about the budget after it's been adopted. If you have something to say, the time to talk is now, not in June. So that's what I had to offer you today. How much time do we have?
15 minutes or so,
Okay.
maybe a little bit more.
So we can take some questions then, if people have any.
Ted, when they ask a question, if you could just repeat it for the microphone.
Sure. Oh, yes, Dave.
What will be the impact when Kenora opens up, the new location later this year?
The question was, what will be the impact of the expansion and the new building for Kenora Brakes? And I don't have a very good answer for that. Most business projects like that don't directly create so much revenue that I would specifically try and account for that in how we're projecting revenue. But I can say that right now, with the situation we've been in, we've been basing our projections solely on reassessments. We have not been trying to build in any extra margin for new growth. So to the extent that Kenora Brake does increase our assessable base, it will be a bonus to what we are planning on today.
In a generalization,
Speak real loud.
in a generalization, what specifics has the county done to lower debt? What actions were taken that could cause that to happen?
The question is, how have we lowered debt? Kind of two pieces to that. There were some projects that were on the books that would have led to debt issuance that the commissioners stopped. I'd have to think a little bit to remember what all of them were, but one example that comes to mind, down near Carrolltown Mall, there were some road improvements we were planning on, which right now we are not moving ahead with. I think there was about a $3 million budget there, if I remember right. So that's money that would have led to debt that didn't happen. And the other is not taking on new projects. We're doing very little new now. So we are paying off debt, but we are taking on debt now at a lower rate than we are paying. And overwhelmingly, our capital program now is focused on maintenance of infrastructure, taking care of the things that we have. There's very little that's going on that you would think of as a project to add to what the county has. Yep.
Through a leadership Carol class I was in a couple of years ago, I seem to remember that the level of funding that the state was providing for roads and infrastructure had been cut significantly. Has any of that funding been restored?
A little bit, but it's mostly gone, and I don't believe will ever come back.
Ted, what's the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. He asked about what they call highway user revenue, state shared revenue with the counties and towns for taking care of roads. At one point, Carroll County was getting about $12 million. We got down to $500,000. We are now back at about $1 million, and I suspect that's where we stay for the long term. The same thing has happened to each of our towns, the same sort of ratios, although the dollar numbers are smaller.
I guess each year you travel up to New York and explain how the county's doing and we get our bond ratings. Can you tell us how the last visit went? Was it January or?
We were there in November, or maybe October. It went well. There are three big rating agencies. They use different systems. We have the equivalent of a AAA and two AA pluses, which, given the economy of Carroll County, in the way that rating agencies look at it at least, is probably about as good as we can expect. But we went up there, we shared what's going on, how we've been handling things, and they seemed content with the idea that how they have been looking at us is still the way that they're looking at us.
Are there key ratios that they're looking at the county as far as making those determinations of our health?
The question was, the rating agencies, do they have certain ratios they look at? And the answer is yes, and they have a lot of stuff that they look at, some of which they say, here are things we're looking at, others things we don't necessarily even know about. But to the extent that we know what they want, we do make an effort to try and make sure that that information is available, and where necessary, provide context. Sometimes you look at a number and it would seem to say something, but without some additional information, you might not understand that it doesn't look, it's not quite what it looks to be.
Ted, for the current budget year, are your revenues coming in as you had projected them to come in?
Question was, current year, fiscal year 13, how are our revenues doing? And right now, I expect to be a couple $1 million in excess of what we budgeted. Now a couple $1 million in one sense is a lot of money, but you're talking about a couple million on $360 million. So as a percent, it's good news, but nothing wildly exciting.
Ted, you all initiated the future budgeting out, was it 6 years or 5 years in addition to your current budget? Could you go down to Washington and explain to them how they could do that? Maybe that wouldn't be such a big financial show.
Wayne was asking about what we call our operating plan, where each year when we adopt the budget, we also adopt 5 years of plans for what those budgets are going to look like. It's a very important thing, I believe, because looking, and the key here is that we balance all those years. So it forces different decisions in the first year than you might make otherwise. If all you're trying to do is balance 1 year, there's lots of ways of getting there. But if you're trying to say, can we keep doing this for 6 years, it forces a whole different set of decisions. My observation is that we're still fairly unusual in doing this, the balancing all the years. It's not hard to find jurisdictions that have multi-year projections, including the state. But you look and what they have is a negative bottom line at some point. So I guess there's some value in looking and understanding that, but it's not nearly as valuable as making the decisions to say what we're going to do today, we'll still be able to do 2 years from now and 4 years from now. And no, I can't go to Washington and explain it.
That's got to help our bond rating, though, I would think.
Yes. He said, does that help the bond rating? And I think they do look at that as a sign of good fiscal management.
If no agreement.
You said you weren't going to ask a question.
If no agreement happens in Washington, how's that going to affect us here when all of these other cuts all kick in? What happens here in our...
Question is, if Congress can't take care of the looming problem, what's it going to mean to us? And that's another one of those things I can't answer. Clearly it's bad news, but how bad, I don't know. I think it's pretty commonly accepted that Maryland will be hurt more than most states. I think there are other counties that will be likely to feel this more than Carroll County. Montgomery, Prince George's, Howard County, Anne Arundel County, you would think would feel it much more than we do. But I'm sure it will have some impact on us, but I have no way to quantify it. Okay.
I had a question, since we still have a few minutes. When does the budget get voted on? What's like the drop dead date where the budget has, because I assume we actually adhere to that, unlike some in Washington. So when is the date when the actual commissioners have to vote on things and the budget gets put into place?
By law, we have to have it adopted by the last day of May. I think this year it's scheduled for May 25th, sticks in my mind. I'm not sure that that's right, but something around there.
But there are still things that they can vote on before then that could have a huge impact on the budget, like the tax break, for instance, right?
Yes, I mean, they don't have to wait to that day to make all their decisions, but in the end, that is the final decision. So even a vote taken tomorrow to say we're going to do or not do something could still end up changing before we get there. But once we hit that date, then it is done. What they have done is adopt a law at that point. And it is quite possible that there will be significant discussions long before we get to that date to say, here's what we are going to do, or one commissioner suggesting something or another.
And tax breaks being what they are, you and I were discussing a little bit before this. If there was let's say a 2% tax break on our actual real estate taxes, the average home in West or in Carroll would save how much on an annual basis?
I think the average price home now is somewhere around $250,000. And our tax rate is 1.018, but if you figure a percent, you're pretty close to just taking a percent of your value. So, it'd be 1 cent change would be roughly $25 on a $250,000 house.
So on an annual basis?
Annual basis.
So $2 a month on your mortgage. I mean, it's good. I mean, it's good to come back, to come back. But I think the issue is, I really appreciated what you said, that the people in this room, you guys are the business owners, you guys are the ones who work for the business. Whatever your opinions are, you need to make them known. Because on the surface, a budget, to have a cut like that sounds wonderful. I mean, everybody likes it. But if that's done, other things, you can put a fork in them too. Things like education and the cut of the funding that would go to education. So, I mean, I think you need to look at that, because from what I understand, the ramifications of that, if education were funded at what they call maintenance of effort, which I guess is the minimum that the state says that we have to fund, I think I recall hearing that you could see 150 to 200 educators lose their job in Carroll. That's at least what I think, from what I've heard. Those discussions need to be had with our commissioners, and they need to be had before things happen that you can't have that discussion, whether you're for it or against it. I really appreciated that. That could be your tagline at the end of each of these things, like, don't be quiet, let your voice be heard on whatever.
Yeah, and to take Mike's point on a couple specific things and make that a little bit more general, in every budget, every decision is a trade-off. A choice to do this is a choice not to do something, even if it doesn't get talked about explicitly that way. In the current situation, where there basically is not any extra money, kind of the best situation we're going to be facing is there's just enough to do what we already intended to do. Every decision becomes a very direct, well, if you want to do more here, you have to do less here, or the other way around. So everything that gets talked about has to be thought in context of not just, is this a good thing, but what does it mean in relationship to other things? Okay, well, thank you all for coming.
Ted, thank you so much for coming. It's been 11 years, huh? That's a lot of. I don't think it's me scaring him away. I don't know. I've said, I don't know what you guys think, if Ted were to say he'd wear an AC/DC t-shirt, wouldn't you guys like to see a little bit different kind of angle on Ted? He's just kind of straight-laced. That may help to bring some folks in, too.
Maybe I'll wear my blue shirt next time.
Your blue shirt, that would work. I like that. It could be me, I don't know. I want to thank you, Ted, again for coming. I want to thank our sponsors, Carl, Dave, thank you guys so much for being here and for supporting us. And we do have events throughout the rest of the year. We have our legislative wrap-up. We need one more sponsorship for that in April. And that is where we have Kathy Snyder, who's the president of the Maryland Chamber, come and say what happened in Annapolis. So it's usually an excellent event. I forget the date, but it's on a sheet. Peggy, did we leave all those sheets? Are you passing them around, or they're on everybody's table? Great. Everybody's got a current listing of all of our events for the course of the year. I'd ask you to please come to a lot of events. And we also have our December luncheon, wide open. We don't even have a topic picked yet. So we're looking for 2 members to help to sponsor that. We are beginning to accept applications for the Leadership Carroll class of 2014. For the last 2 years, we've had 34 folks come through that class, and we'd love to get it. We've already got 4 applications in now. We haven't even opened it up to take applications. So it's a great event. How many people here have been through Leadership Carroll? Show of hands. Great. So all of you here are the people who are watching this thing streaming live. If you want to come to an unbelievably awesome event that lasts 10 months out of the year, just give us a call, and we'd love to get you on board. Yes, sir, Mr. Grimes.
Best class was 2010.
Of course, 2010 was the best class. That's, I'm sure. Excellent class. Okay, the staff here, thank you so much. These guys are open for business, obviously. There was a while there where we thought that the entire place might close down, but they've just scaled back a little bit. They do a great job. And I think they can handle overnight up to like 30 or so. So we'd love to see you guys, anybody here have a meeting here. They can have huge meetings. I think well over 100 folks could attend. So please. I want to thank Steve Wantz, our chair, for doing a great job. How about a round of applause for Steve? He does a nice job. And the Community Media Center, where would we be without those guys? If you work for them, stand up. Who's an employee here? Marion, come on, stand up, stand up. Sure. Nice job. Wonderful. And last but not least, Ellen Manning. Ellen, would you stand up? Ellen's in the back, and Ellen works for Atlantic Communication, which is the company that comes out with our beautiful chamber directory. Well, this year we are coming out, we haven't had one in 5 years, we're coming out with a new map. It's a map of Carroll County, all the roads and all that, and there'll be some inserts for the towns, and we're looking if you'd like to advertise. There will be a long shelf life on this thing because we'll probably get about 5,000 to 10,000 copies. No, not 5 to 10 years, but it'll be at least a couple year actual shelf life. So if you'd like to advertise in that, please get a hold of Ellen. Are there any announcements that I've missed? I think whenever we have a meeting like this or our actual commissioner meetings, it's a great time to get the business community in front of our elected officials, to be able to talk to them, not just pick up sound bites or what somebody else may say. And there are a lot of folks that don't want to raise their hand and ask a question in a group like this. That's why you've got Ted here. Ted, are you going to be around a little bit afterwards? Maybe for a couple minutes? Or are you running?
I can stay for a little bit.
You can stay for a couple minutes, or you can get his business card. You can give him a call. I'd encourage you to come to our commissioner breakfasts. They're great. Give you a chance to talk to the commissioners and see if some are, really saying what others say that they're saying. So that being said, I would like to adjourn the meeting at this point and thank you all for coming, okay? Thank you so much. I appreciate it.